Thank you for listening and supporting the Daily Memphian. Sign up for one of our many free newsletters and breaking news alerts at dailymemphian.com/email to receive the latest local news stories impacting our community. Our weekly newsletters cover everything from sports to arts and culture, business, food, and more, along with daily updates of all the news we publish each day. Sign up or manage your email preferences at dailymemphian.com/email.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Daily Memphians Tigers podcast. I'm the basketball beat writer, Stephen Johnson, joined by my guy, Frank Bonner, who covers the football team for Memphis. Another week, another lot of topics going on. The Tigers basketball team is in the midst of a 3-game losing streak. They're looking to bounce back. On the football side of things, Tigers have a little time off before their bowl game in Hawaii, but we still got early signing day, and there was a big staff change announced last night. But before we get into all that, don't forget to check out some of our other podcasts. Jennifer Biggs hosts Soundbites, Eric Barnes hosts The Sidebar, and our guys Chris Harrington and Drew Hill record the Grizzlies podcast every single week. You can find all of these in the Tigers podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, and of course, dailymemphian.com. So Frank, we had a little bit of breaking news last night. Memphis defensive coordinator Mike MacIntyre, former head coach of Colorado, will be leaving Memphis to be the head coach at Florida International University. I guess what were just some of your initial thoughts about that move?
Well, first I was, happy for Mike MacIntyre. When you're in a position where you've been a head coach at two different programs, I think the goal is to get back there and for him to be able to be a head coach where he's from over in Florida. So I think it's a good situation for him family-wise and job-wise. And then obviously the next question is, who does Memphis look to? And one of the names that I've seen thrown around pretty early is Scott Simons, who was the linebacker coach in 2018 and has done a pretty good job over there at Liberty. Liberty's defense and total defense was ranked 11th in the country this year. So, he can get the job done as a defensive coordinator. So we'll see if anything spurs with that name, but that was one of the initial names that have kind of been thrown out there as soon as the news broke.
Well, we kind of talked about how year 3 is going to be big for Ryan Silverfield. They did or were able to make a bowl game, and whether or not this was mutual or both part, it might have been best for both parties. Now he has an opportunity to, I think, nail at least one coordinator hire. So how big is this hire going to be for him going in year 3? Yeah,
I think it's going to be big, and I think now, granted, I don't know if he was where he was on feeling like he needed to make another hire, whether he was going to let, Mike go or whatever. But I think him going and receiving this job kind of takes some pressure off of him of having to make that decision, whether to keep him or to hire. He kind of made it for him. So I think this is huge. And then the other part of that is, do you keep your offensive coordinator? We'll see about that. But I think for his status, surrounding yourself with good coordinators is important for any head coach, but it's specifically Silverfield, who is going into year 3 kind of with all the chips on the table here.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the thing with Coach Mac, great quote as it is, I got to give him credit. I know his defense has kind of started off rough, but it seemed like by the end of the season, at least in back-to-back years, they had kind of hit another groove, and I wouldn't say, went to being very good or anything like that, but they were a solid defense by the end of the season. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and I think as a coach, whether you're a coordinator, head coach, or whatever, one of the things you want to do is to have your team, end the year better than how they started. And I think MacIntyre did that in both years, and so you give him a kudos for that. But, to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit, what some people would say, looking at how they ended the year last year, how come they weren't able to start that way this year? And so I think that can be twofold.
Looking towards another year. I'm not sure how many. I don't think the Tigers, you always have to worry about the transfer portal, but I'm not sure if they'll lose many guys on that end going to the draft, except for maybe J.J. Russell. From a talent standpoint, what's the outlook and what's the next DC? What is he going to have to work with next year?
Well, you're going to lose some of those seniors, whether it be, Russell or, you've got, Quindell Johnson was was recognized as a senior on senior day. And so, when he was asked about it, he said no comment. So, you don't know if you're going to have him or not next year. And so, you're going to lose a lot of that senior leadership, that veteran leadership, I should say. But in terms of the turnover, I would argue that in the year that you're losing some veteran leadership is a good time to have a new coordinator and having that coordinator help build new leaders, as opposed to coming in when some of that leadership is already established. And so I think this will be a good time for a new coordinator, because you're going to see some new leaders in that locker room on the defensive end.
Yeah, I think if Quindell's out there for senior day, to me, that's the writing on the wall. I'm pretty sure he's not an actual senior in name. So I got to think that I know he had a great year last year. I think he was solid again this year. So I got to imagine he might be one of the guys that might wants to test the waters. But do you think this will have Coach Mack leaving, maybe a week or so ahead of early signing day? Do you think that have any impact on the recruiting class, or is this going to kind of be, business as usual?
I think the commits that they have, I think they're still going to come. I think it'll be more business as usual. Because, what the thing about recruiting is, a lot of players are looking at the position coach as like their, I guess, number one hands-on coach. And so if I'm a linebacker or if I'm a defensive lineman or whatever, if my position coach isn't changing, I may still come. And so I think, the recruiting wise, I think those guys will still come.
Well, still some exciting time. We're still a couple weeks away from the Tigers kind of wrapping up the season. On the basketball front, it's a lot of drama. It's been quite the week, to put it mildly. The Tigers are in the midst of a 3-game losing streak. The loss to Iowa State that kind of set it off doesn't look that bad now, because the Cyclones look like they're legit, but they followed that loss up with, I think, definitely a brutal loss to Georgia, who will probably be maybe one of the worst teams in the SEC, and Ole Miss, who I think will probably be middle of the pack. So the Tigers are kind of reeling right now. The good news is they do get Murray State at home, but this Murray State hasn't played the most daunting schedule, but Murray State will come into that game 7-1. So I would call it a trap game, but Memphis should already kind of be focused, and they got to come in, and they should be desperate on Friday. I'll say that.
Yeah, and I think at least from what I could tell, obviously I wasn't in those post games, but I read a lot and saw on Twitter. I think what's just as concerning, if not more concerning, than the 3 losses, is some of Penny Hardaway's comments about the state of that locker room in terms of guys not playing for each other and so on. And so you being closer to the program, do you think that's more of the players just not getting it together, or is that mainly on coaching not being able to galvanize those guys?
To me, it's on coaching. Because I think the culture you said starts with, and the culture starts with you. So if you brought all these guys in, because remember Imani and Jalen Duren, they came in August, kind of after the roster was already seeming like it was finalized almost. So when those guys are coming in, knowing that you have this contingent of veterans that have their own ambitions, have their own goals for the season, it's on you to kind of set the tone and kind of just establish those things on the team. And I'm not sure Penny acknowledged that he's been too nice. So to me, that says that you haven't ruled that Iron Fist sounds a little bit dramatic, but you have to be stern sometimes when it comes to setting the culture, and in terms of things that you will or won't allow. But what he described, I think, was definitely troubling. It was like a locker room that just had beef with each other, man. And that was the two things we worried about: point guard and chemistry. And the chemistry sounds like it's worse than any of us could have imagined.
Now, how much, in terms of chemistry-wise, how much of that do you think is just I don't know if this is the right term, but like sporadic nature of the rotation, in terms of guys just not being able to know what their minutes roles are going to be, each game?
I think that plays a lot into it, and I think he has been indecisive with what he wants his wants this rotation to be. They're still playing double-digit guys. And they're playing double-digit guys before we even get to like the 10-minute mark in like the first half. So I think it's difficult in terms of the on-court product, I think it's difficult for guys to keep a rhythm because, like, against Ole Miss, they started off hot. I think they went 4-6. They got 6 straight wide-open looks. And then, 16, I think it's 16-41, first time out. Then, he brings in 4 different guys, and then the offense never got in the rhythm. So I think with Penny, man, going forward, especially with Alabama and Tennessee next week, you have to really lock in on 8 guys, 9 at the most, and you got to give these guys extended run. And I mean, it's okay to let guys play through 2 media timeouts, get to the 12-minute, 10-minute mark. And I just think that they have so much depth that, too much of anything can harm you. You know what I mean? And I think Penny is still feeling this pressure. He wants to use everybody in specific roles. And sometimes it's just, I think he needs to go game by game. Like a guy like Tyler Harris, like if you need a spark at the end of the game, okay, let's put him in. But other than that, I'm not sure how much he should be playing. Same for Jaden Hardaway, who isn't going to necessarily do anything to hurt the team, but he might not be doing a lot to kind of help the team if he's not being able to get off his jump shot and things of that nature. So, and then there's like guys like Josh Minot, who he admitted he was cheating out of minutes. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and the fact that we're moving towards almost game 10 and it still doesn't seem like he has a solidified rotation, I think that's playing a big part in it too.
It's funny you say that about Tyler Harris because I was going to bring Tyler Harris up. I'm actually an advocate of more minutes for Tyler Harris, or not necessarily more, but keeping him in that upper echelon of rotation. I just like the energy that he brings to the court, specifically to that offense, because we've seen a lot of times this season where the offense has struggled, and Tyler Harris has been that spark at times for them, and so I think Memphis kind of needs to keep that.
The only thing with Tyler, because of his size and teams know he's a shooter, if they're taking away that jump shot, he's really worked hard to kind of impact the games in other ways. He's more active on the boards than he was previously. He defends hard, even though he has a size disadvantage. So I wouldn't necessarily disagree. And if you're Penny Hardaway, who said he wants to play the guys that quote unquote care more, I got to imagine Tyler's one of those guys that cares the most. So with everything he said about the veterans, Alex Lomax, Lester Quinones, Landers Nolly, and things of that nature, if he really wants to send a message, if he really is that displeased with what's going on with his veteran players, then maybe you do kind of sit one of those guys or play one of those guys list and give those minutes to a Tyler Harris or a Josh Minot who should have been playing from the jump. I think that's inexcusable that he kind of fell out of the rotation these last 3 or 4 games. It looks like he'll be back in it, but I could see the case. And like I said, if you're going to, Penny Hardaway made the comment, if I played the 5 guys that cared the most, we'd be undefeated by now. Okay, well, you need to go ahead and play them then.
Yeah, because that's you can't say that and then not play them because then folks are going to be scratching their head about your coaching. Mm-hmm. You mentioned how desperate they've got to be, coming into this Murray State game. Obviously, we know the connections with John Morant, but with the recent news, it seems like he probably won't be able to watch that game, if I'm correct.
I would assume that. I think I read somewhere that he doesn't necessarily have to quarantine, but I think he'll likely probably stay at home. But either way, like Murray's they're coming in with plenty of motivation to knock out Memphis, whether Ja's on the sideline or not, because it's Memphis, because they're a team that, of course, is no stranger to the tournament. They could easily win their conference. So they're probably coming in thinking that they can win this game, and Memphis has given them every reason to believe that they can do it, honestly.
Now, how many wins do they need to string together in your mind for them to get back into the poll?
I think they were receiving votes last week. So I think if you can win tomorrow, and if you split against Tennessee and Alabama, I could see them sneaking into number 24. And I say this, if you split next week and both games are competitive, like you lose a close one to Alabama, but you beat Tennessee or vice versa, I think they could sneak back into like 24, 23 or so, because as bad as things are right now, if you do that, you'll walk out of the non-conference. I know they got one more against Alabama State. You'll walk out of the non-conference schedule with wins over Virginia Tech, Murray State, and Alabama or Tennessee, which should be a top 25 team. So, and also St. Louis, which is kind of decent as well. So it's not, they didn't maximize the opportunity per se, but it wouldn't be a complete failure at that point. You would have done a lot of leg where you need to do. And if you handle your business in conference play, split with Houston, pick up a win over Wichita State, etc., you should be a tournament team at that point.
Now, I mean, there's still a lot to play for, but one of the quotes that I saw on Twitter that I thought was pretty concerning was Penny mentioned something about he wasn't sure if veterans were going to be looking to leave the program or something along that line. From a scale from 1 to 10, how concerned are you? How concerned should Memphis fans be about that possibly being an issue of players looking to leave?
I would say an 8, just because, I mean, honestly, just from Penny Hardaway's own words, just from the lack of confidence, and I'm not sure. He's honest, man, and that's good for us, but maybe for the fans and things like that, it might be honesty to a fault. But he sounded like it sounded like it was 50-50 at that time. I've been asked a couple of times if somebody set the line at 0.5. I would lean to take the over right now. Now, they got 4 more games, I think, before the break, or it might be 3. So I think what happens over this next week or so will really go a long ways towards determining if guys are staying or going. You know, if they reel off some wins, then maybe everybody's like, okay, let me endure. But if, you know, they keep losing and guys' playing time is being taken away, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody hit the portal and explored their options.
Now, are you foreshadowing that this team can get it together and still be that Sweet 16 caliber program that folks thought they would be this year?
Right now, I just think their goal should be just to make it to the tournament and just go from there. I mean, I'll see how they do tomorrow against Friday. That's a game. It might be challenging, but that's a game you should win. I would say by double figures. Like, Murray State hasn't played any high major teams yet. They're going to play us tempo that Memphis likes. They like to get up and down. So does Memphis. So that's a game that I think they should win. You know, I won't say comfortably by like 15 or so, but that should be a game that really doesn't feel in doubt most of the way. So if they start there, I think that'll be a good start. Now, if you go 2-0 next week against Alabama and Tennessee, then it's like, okay, maybe something clicking. But right now, I just think the goal for Memphis should be to make the NCAA tournament. It will be below expectations, but it's still history because this program hasn't been in so long. So let's see what they do tomorrow. And then, well, depending on what happens next week, then there'll be a time that I think where I can really assess what the expectations should be for Memphis going to conference play.
My first order of business is trying to snap this 3-game winning streak or 3-game losing streak. Yeah, right. And then, you know, obviously football's in at least one coaching search for a coordinator. We'll see if there's any other coaching changes once the Hawai'i Bowl is over with. Stay tuned for next week.
In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.